So, welcome to this video where we're going to go over the concept of a stem and leaf diagram, okay? So the first thing we need to understand about a stem and leaf diagram is when we can use it. So we're going to see that we're going to use it when we have small amounts. You see the key that we have small amounts. If you have a large amount here, this is not going to be useful. And it has to be discrete data. This means, remember, that we're talking about data that cannot be divided into smaller units, okay? So, for example, here we have one stem and leaf diagram already presented that shows raw percentages of scores of 15 students. Here we're considering scores to be discrete data that you cannot have a 53.5, for example. So, the most important thing to understand when working with a stem and leaf diagram is that you must include a key. Okay, the key is essential for you to complete a stem and leaf diagram because the key is the one that tells the reader how to understand the diagram. So in this case, for example, we are saying that 53 here, this 5/3 represents a score of 53%. So that is how we're going to understand the diagram. Observe that we are told here that the first column is called the stem. This is why we give the name. And then we have each row attached to be the leaf. And we also call these rows classes of value. So, for example, let's try to understand some of the numbers here. Here we're told that the key is that 5 and a 3 means 53. So then, for example, we can try to make sense of this number. This 5 here, and then we have this other 5 here. That means that there is a 55% somewhere along the exam. Then the same 5, but with this 8, that means that there's a 58 somewhere around. And then we can keep on going. For example, we can say here, okay, there's 7, and then there's 2. That means that there was a 72%. And then, for example, this 9 with this 7, that is a 97%. Observe that, for example, if you look at the 8 has no number in the leaf. That means that there were no 80 somethings, there were no 80%, no 81%, there was no value obtained there. So we can take a look at this and we can say, well, great, so which are the actual scores? Well, the actual scores, for example, we have this 58. This 58 that we have here, as we said earlier, was this one here and this one here, that we have the 58. But also there was another 58 that is here, and we can observe that there is another 5 and 8 there. So there are two 58s, two 8s in the leaf of the 5. So from there we can keep on going with each of the numbers. I believe that you may be able to show that. For example, if you want to look for this 77, well, this 77 is just this 7 and then this 7. Each of the 15 numbers in the diagram represent one of these scores that were obtained in the exam. So this is the first diagram we're going to see, and then we can enhance this, we can expand it into what we call a back-to-back stem and leaf diagram, which we use when we're going to relate two sets of data. Okay, we're going to compare two sets of comparable data, right? We're not going to compare percentages and then, I don't know, heights. That has nothing to do. But when we have two sets of data we can compare, we can use this back-to-back stem and leaf diagram. How does it work? Well, imagine here we're going to see this example where we have number of days in which rain fell in a certain town. This is the same town, so it makes sense to compare them. And we have the data from 2016 and 2017. Observe that in January there were 17 days of rain, then in February there were 20 days of rain, in March 13, and then so on and so on for 2016. And then for 2017 we have 9 days, 13 days, 11 days, and so on and so on and so on. So how is this going to work? Well, again, we're going to have the stem that's going to be at the middle of our diagram. Okay, and we're going to have to the right one piece of information and to the left another piece of information. So for example, we have here to the left 2016 and to the right 2017. So for example, again, always focus on the key. What does the key tell you? In this case, the key tells you that 500 represents 5 days in a month of 2016 and 6 days in a month of 2017. So how do you read it? Well, this is talking about this 0 here. with this 6 and this 5. The key can relate to any piece of data, okay? It doesn't have to be the first one. But here we can say, okay, that we have that in 1 month, we don't know which month. This is not telling us about which month. This is just telling about the number of days that rained in a certain town. So there was 1 month that there were 6 days of rain in 2017. We can also say that, for example, there were here, if we look at these two values, we can say that there were 2 different months where there were 2 days of rain. This would be, for 2017, it will be August and September, right? There were 2 months with 2 days, so we have the 2 twice. And then again, we can keep on moving. Well, this one, we're using this 3, that means a 13. Note that we are reading from the middle to the outsides of the diagram. So in the case of 2016, we will be reading from the center to the left. So that would be at 10, 11, 12, 13, 16, and 17. That's for 2016. And then for 2017, it will be 11 and 13. Finally, we have the class of the 2 because there is a 20. The 20 that is here in February is seen here with this 2 and this 0. There is no 20th, no class of 20th in the 2017. So this is how a back-to-back stem and leaf diagram works. It's a very interesting piece of information to show like raw data, but again, it has to be small amounts, okay? If this gets too crowded, then it's not going to be as useful. So have it in your toolbox and use it when you find it useful.